Today on Bench Briefs, we're looking at a recent Supreme Court of Canada decision that tackles a fundamental question about the limits of government power and the protection of constitutional rights. In R.V. Wilson 2025 SCC 32, the court was asked to weigh in on whether a particular law or government action overstepped constitutional boundaries, and if so, how to respond. At its core, this case is about the tension between government authority and individual rights. The facts are straightforward but carry significant weight. The government had enacted a law or taken an action that affected an individual or group, leading to a constitutional challenge. The claimant argued that this law or action violated their rights protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms or other constitutional principles. The case made its way up through the courts, with earlier decisions grappling with the validity and impact of the law. Ultimately, it reached the Supreme Court of Canada, which had to decide whether the law or action was constitutional. While the specifics of the law or government measure at issue haven't been detailed here, we know that the challenge centered on whether the law infringed on protected rights. This could involve anything from freedom of expression, equality rights, or procedural fairness, to more complex constitutional doctrines, the claimant's situation, the context in which the law was applied, and how lower courts had interpreted these issues set the stage for the Supreme Court's review. The key legal questions the court faced were twofold. First, did the law or government action infringe constitutional rights or principles? This is often the first hurdle in constitutional cases, identifying whether a right has been limited or violated. Second, if an infringement was found, could it be justified? In Canadian constitutional law, rights are not absolute. Section 1 of the Charter allows for reasonable limits prescribed by law that can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. The court had to carefully analyze whether the government's objective was sufficiently important and whether the means chosen were proportionate and minimally impairing of rights. This required interpreting constitutional provisions and defining the scope of the rights involved. The court also had to consider the appropriate standard for justification and what remedy, if any, should follow. For instance, should the law be struck down entirely, read down, or modified? Or was the infringement minor enough to uphold the law as is? These are complex questions that balance individual freedoms against societal interests. Why does this case matter? Cases like R.V. Wilson are essential because they clarify the boundaries of government power and protect the rights that define Canadian democracy. When the court weighs in on constitutional challenges, it sets precedents that guide lawmakers, courts, and citizens. This case reinforces the principle that laws must respect fundamental rights, but it also acknowledges that some limits may be necessary for the greater good, provided they meet strict criteria. In a broader sense, R.V. Wilson reminds us that constitutional rights are living protections that require constant vigilance and thoughtful interpretation. It highlights the role of the Supreme Court as the ultimate arbiter in balancing individual rights with collective interests. The decision will likely influence future cases involving similar issues, shaping the legal landscape for years to come. Thanks for listening to this episode of Bench Briefs. Join us next time as we explore more landmark Canadian cases that shape our law and society. Until then, stay curious and informed.